intelligence group inside our business services and administrative applications. Also joining me is Yvette Mosey-Ross. Yvette is the Associate Provost for Enrollment Management, and I have Michael Dillon, Director of Institutional Research. What we're going to do is provide some background information on the case study that we've submitted for the analytics as a game changer in higher ed with Educause. And so hopefully our first slide can take you through to something where we describe our governance, and we talked about this in the case study. One of the interesting things about the governance is that when Michael joined UMBC in 2006, we initially started, about a year and a half after he joined, creating a traditional data management council. And what we found was that while it was a good start and it began to get the campus engaged, we didn't have the right level of engagement. We had some high-level people, but they weren't necessarily sure how they should be participating. And we were missing some people who were in the trenches, so to speak, but who were key to making sure that the quality of data and the capabilities that we needed to deploy were going to be present. And so Michael sort of stepped back and worked with me, and we ended up coming up with a very different sort of model for our data management committee that became more team-based. And I'm going to turn to Michael, and I'm going to ask Michael to talk a little bit about this team-based approach.
So there's a list of the teams here. They meet, the data management committee only meets twice a year, but during that committee meeting, each of one of these teams has representatives that talk about what they have accomplished over the past 6 months and what they plan to accomplish in the next 6 months. And that seems to be working quite well. A couple of things about these teams. These are all organic in nature, meaning that they were evolving even without the data management committee process in place. They were coming out naturally by the fact that we were changing and prioritizing the data warehouse. They sort of grew out of that. The other thing about these teams is that they're all multi-departmental. They have representation both from IR, IT, also enrollment management, and other offices around campus. And some of these are more formal in the sense that they meet on a regular basis. Other of these teams are more ad hoc in that they meet when necessary. So I'm going to quickly walk through these different teams with you. Starting on the far left-hand side is the data warehouse team. That meets every single week and is really the core operation for managing the data warehouse, reporting from the warehouse, changes to the warehouse itself. That meets every Friday. Every other Friday, there is a Rex user group meeting, which has the people in the data warehouse team, plus users who can come and discuss particular reports, perhaps additional fields that they need, etc. There's actually, talking about the organic part of this, there's actually going to be a new team that's being developed now that's going to be a report developer team, which is going to talk about, we're using reporting services for creating reports, and there's going to be a representation from admissions, financial aid, continuing ed, the registrar's office, as well as IR and IT. They're basically going to learn how to build reports together. Then there's the data quality team. Now this is where we move to more ad hoc, meaning different people meet on data quality issues at different points in time. It's not really a large group. It's somebody in my office, Michael Glasser, really working with many different offices, sometimes one-on-one, to talk about how to build data quality. We don't call them data error checks, but data quality checks with different offices. And this has really grown to be now hundreds of data quality checks are now in, not just for IR's purposes, but for admissions and financial aid, et cetera. Another team is the data access and security team, which is actually headed not by somebody on the reporting end, but actually on the PeopleSoft SA end. Because there's some ways so for like security and confidentiality agreements, et cetera, these are being done not just for the data warehouse, or what we call Rex, but is also in PeopleSoft, ResLife, and all different information systems. The setup tables team is really one that is a virtual team. It doesn't really meet as a group that often, but it manages whenever there's changes, let's say additional program is put into place, additional subjects that these have to be managed so that they roll up properly to the, to proper roll-up. And finally, we have a training team, which we also keep called a communication team. It's headed by Kevin, who does training for both for SA and for our data warehouse recs. And it's also a communication stream that goes out to academic departments, deans, et cetera, to talk about new reporting capabilities and where they can find them, and solicit feedback from them as to their reporting needs.
In terms of the way that the data management committee fits into the broader university IT governance, there's really two ways that it makes itself useful. One, it has a connection to our IT steering committee, and that committee is chaired by the vice provost and myself, and that really focuses on strategic issues, policy-related issues. And so if the data management committee is going to make a recommendation, such as all users have to have FERPA training, or that we need to have a policy in place for doing something, it'll go up through the IT steering committee. For other activities around sort of activities where we want to expand the warehouse or directions that we want to go, the data management committee reports up through our campus systems executive committee, and that committee is co-chaired by Yvette and myself. That meets by every other week. And what we do is we're able to bring business cases and other information to the front, run it by all the stakeholders, and make sure that people are comfortable before we would make a recommendation to go forward with expansion of the data warehouse. Kevin, could you go to the next slide? So Yvette, I'm going to turn to you because a lot of this material came from a poster session that you had done last year, and what I think is really interesting is it was part of our campus retreat. And so we have about 200 members of the campus community attend the campus retreat, most of the academic chairs, many of the key staff on campus, a number of faculty. And you did this poster session and interacted with much of the campus. Could you talk a little bit about what you did?
Sure. One of the things we recognized as we were preparing to roll this tool out to the broader campus, one of the things we recognized early on was that it was not enough just to make this tool available, that we were going to have to help the managers and decision makers understand how this tool can be useful in their day-to-day planning and decision making. And so the university retreat offered an opportunity for us to engage the campus leadership about this. And so we posed the question to our campus leaders, our academic chairs, our deans, our undergraduate and graduate program directors, what if you knew? What if you knew with some more specificity information about your students, their academic and demographic background information? What if you knew how your students were doing in specific courses, in particular programs? What if you knew more about the specific courses that your students were taking? How could that help in terms of planning, having appropriate numbers of courses available for students? And so we asked the question, what if you knew? And what we helped them bridge the connection is that if you had this sort of information available to you, then you could be more targeted in your, for example, be more targeted in your marketing and recruitment efforts, enhance some of your academic advising practices, do more outreach to support students that maybe are not doing so well in particular courses, and maybe even adjust your pedagogy in a way that can be more helpful for your students. So this is the sort of information we were able to help our campus decision makers and leaders see how this tool could be useful for them.
Go ahead, Kevin, to the next slide. One of the things that we've done with Rex over the last year is we've really focused on trying to be making this a consistent solution across the campus. I think one of the challenges you can often run into at a campus is the fact that every area comes up with its own solution for reporting. And so users, which often have financial needs, student performance needs, other needs, are finding that they're cutting across and having to learn multiple tools. One of the things early on we learned is that by standardizing on a tool set and trying to give a more consistent way of approaching the data, we were able to sort of speed up user adoption, both for our regular users, the academic chairs, program directors, et cetera, but also even for many of our key staff who had to learn how to create reports and things like that. Within the REX data set, we have the 5 areas that are listed there under student administration: admissions, financial aid, enrollment, student performance, retention. We've also, though, added in a lot of other data sets that we are bringing in. And so we track trouble tickets across many units here in the university. And so on average, we get about 100,000 trouble tickets a year. We're now bringing all that data into the system to be able to do better management of our support processes across units. We're a pilot for Blackboard Learning Analytics. And so while we had been doing reporting on our Blackboard instances for a number of years, we're able to dive much deeper now with the Learning Analytics module and be able to show faculty where students are spending most of their time. We use this system for project tracking. And lastly, we've adopted about 1.5 years ago all of our financial data. Now, presently, we're just showing our state accounts that go through this. We have a project that's going to be starting this upcoming year that's going to focus on bringing all of our grant and project-related data into the data warehouse so that faculty will be able to use this. In addition, we're starting a major effort around a new faculty workload reporting tool. And one of the thoughts that we've had as Michael and I have been working on this has really been, can we bring all of that data into the data warehouse and be capturing it in one location and being able to expand and have a better profile of all the faculty that we have on campus. So next, we're going to show just some sample reports. And this is just a very simple report that comes out using the ProClarity system that we're leveraging as an underlying report tool. And it shows the fact that you can do some basic graphics with histograms and things like this. This is a basic student demographic report. I think a more interesting report, and I'll turn to Michael and Yvette to talk about this, is the time to degree by undergraduate major.
Sure. This is pretty straightforward. It gives for those people and different who get degrees in different academic departments, the average years it took that student to graduate. So this goes beyond just your basic retention graduation report that just looks at the university as a whole and asks how long does it take somebody to graduate, but really then hones into particular departments and how long they take. So management science, which has very few students, has an average years to graduate of 9 years.
I should add there's only one student, and that probably is an anomaly that's there. One of the things that's interesting about this data, and we were chatting, is that historically we've talked about time to degree at the campus level, at the university level, and often, what that masks is the fact that there's a variance inside different departments and different programs that are there, and so being able to bring this data up to everyone so that you can see now allows you to see that there are differences between programs, and maybe chairs and deans and others can take some efforts to try to be looking at what are some programs doing that seems to be very successful, how can we model that success in other areas, and really work to try to be improving the overall time to degree in every department that we have on campus. Kevin, could you now show some of the on the system? And I guess I'll turn to Michael and Yvette and let you talk about these reports a little bit.
Okay, sure. The first report we'd like to share is this, what we call the course utilization report. And I like this report because I think it's a great example of how we're using the data to inform decisions about how to best direct limited resources or how to shift resources. And so just a little background, the Course Demand Committee, which is a campus-wide committee comprised of various members from around the campus, including the colleges, the registrar's office, the academic advising office, and enrollment management, are charged with monitoring course availability and course demand, and identifying where there may be places where there's increased demand due to enrollment pressure, and making recommendations to the chairs and the deans about adding additional sections of courses. And so we meet regularly, and we use this data to highlight for us where we may be oversubscribed or approaching near capacity. And so, as you can see, an example here would be Spanish 103. This is actually real data here. So we see right now that we are actually at capacity with Spanish 103. And so in this particular case, we have made a plea to the department chair and the dean to add an additional section and able to secure support from the provost for some funding to add that additional section. And this is what's important to understand is that in the past we have relied on static reports to inform this process, and that required us to be more reactionary than proactive in this, and this has really allowed us to get on top of this and stay ahead of the curve. We start looking at this as early as advanced registration, at the start of registration, and monitor it well into the end of schedule adjustment period. But what's important to understand is that we're not only using this to identify where we may be reaching capacity or oversubscribed, but we also use it to identify where we may be underutilized in terms of our courses. An example of that right now would be Africana Studies 206, where we see that we're well into the registration process, but we're only at 16% course utilization for this course. So in this particular case, we would, the Director of Academic Advising will send out a message to the advising community, encouraging them to encourage their students to consider this course as they're making their course selection.
Could you also say something cool about this particular report? Kevin, can you hover over like Africana Studies 206? Why don't you see if we can get it? See, this actually has tooltips in it, which will allow you, whether you're at the section level or at the course level, give you a whole host of additional information, so you don't have to be flipping back and forth to some other report in order to understand what is Africana Studies 206 or who's teaching it, et cetera, which I think is a neat feature.
Yeah, as a VP, one of the things that I know that has been a real win in this report is the fact that by exposing information much earlier in the process, we can accelerate the hiring sequence. And so as opposed to waiting until we get closer to the semester and saying, oh, we have a problem, we need to add more sections, we're seeing that the deans, the vice presidents, and others are meeting early in the process so that we're getting these decisions made as early as possible so that we can be getting the best possible people in place for students to be able to meet the courses that they need in order to be able to graduate. Kevin, could you show the other report that we wanted to demo, this grade distribution report? And Michael, I'm going to turn to you because this is, I think, a great report, and it's one that your office has come out with just recently. And can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, sure. This gives, for the fall of 2011, I believe, the grade distribution. And it's broken down first by the university as a whole. So what it's showing here is 15.5% of all the, I guess these are undergraduate courses, 15.5% of the people either get a D, an F, or they withdrew from the class, so the DFW rate. And you can see on the graph there, it graphs that in green, that it's about 15%. Going down a level, we have the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Science, and for them as a whole, the DFW rate is 13.8%, or slightly lower than the university total. Then you can drill down even further and just go to a particular department, in this case Africana Studies, and you'll see that Africana Studies has a slightly higher DFW rate than for KAHS as a whole. And once again, you could go down to the course level, looking at Africana Studies 100, and you can see that it has a slightly lower DFW rates than Africana Studies as a whole. And furthermore, you can even drill down to the section level. There's 3 sections of Africana Study, and they have variations in their DFW rates from 4.9% all the way up to 25.7%. And the graph allows you at all these levels to be able to see whether or not you're above the average or lower than the average based on where you are, the section, the course, the department, et cetera. Also in this report, you have the average grade of all the students who got grades in the course. And even to the right there, you actually have the actual distributions of A's, B's, D's, F's, etc. And that could be expanded to actually show the numbers if you wanted to. Also, just to show the tooltip, if you go over to Africana Studies 100, that will also tell you who the instructor is of that particular section. So in a fairly compact space, you can get a lot of information by taking a look at this report.
You know, one of the things that's interesting to me about this report is that as a vice president, one of the things we do in our vice presidents and deans meeting is at least once a semester we'll end up reviewing the classes where we're seeing higher rates of DFW that are going on, and we're having discussions among the campus and deans around how we can be better improving student success and things like that. Having this kind of information where you can see. Now, in this case, it was the same instructor, so it was probably a different sequence of students as to when they registered, things like that. But in some instances, you may notice this variation by the fact that you have different instructors. That might then be highlighting that we want to work with an instructor to be able to go over what the pedagogy is that they're using, find other ways that we can be improving instruction, etc. And so these kinds of information presented in a nice way like this really is helpful for the campus leadership to be able to be making decisions. At this point, one of the key things that I think we want to say as we begin to close is this was just a very brief sort of summary of some of the kinds of reports that we're developing, some of the ways that we're working. A lot of people have asked, you know, what's the secret sauce in, you know, what's the way that UMBC is able to be successful with analytics? And I think it's really the fact that we've had such good collaboration. I really want to highlight the work that Kevin, Yvette, Michael's groups have really done in working with each other. They have really brought together all the best thinking and are trying to really help solve some of the more substantial issues that are facing the university. So thank you. And this will be the end of this. And if you have questions, feel free to email us or refer to the Game Changers case study for more information on how to reach us. Thank you.